Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Sam here, and today I'm going to be tackling some of your questions that you've put through to me in the comments in YouTube here. So I'm always grateful for the engagement, so thanks for the questions. The questions today are going to cover the push, pull and leg split, whether I'd recommend any SARMs or steroids to a beginner, what you can do about machines not fitting or you not fitting in the machine, however you'd say it, and then also how you would know when you're ready to compete or what size you would be, which I've tackled before, but it's a different angle on it. So I'm going to cover those in that order today, so feel free to skip through if just one of those four particular areas is of interest to you, because they're all quite different, you know. And firstly, this was a comment from Arno3862. Thanks for your comment, bro. You've complimented my channel. I do appreciate that. And you've asked in your question, why is a push-pull day so important and what exercise goes best with them? Well, I did touch on this a little bit in my video where I talked about training splits and the different ones that they are, but I can go into more depth on the push-pull thing today. So there are people who are more specialised in this. I have to admit I haven't done a push-pull leg split myself for quite a long time. But now that I think about it, I think it'll make great content. So I'm going to do at least a week of a push-pull leg split in the coming weeks to show you what it looks like. So you'll be able to follow that as well. But what I can say today is the theory behind it and give some examples of exercises you'd put in and what the overall rationale with it is. So someone who's been putting out some really good videos lately is Kuba Chellan. I hope I'm saying the name right, but he's an IFBB pro bodybuilder in the UK with a YouTube channel, and he's given examples of his splits that are push-pull legs. So if you wanted the latest examples of in pro bodybuilding how they're being used, that would be a good resource. But the basic rationale behind it is that you are using certain muscles in conjunction with each other when you do certain exercises anyway, and therefore to design a system around muscles that would work in a complementary fashion and then be able to have total rest between the sessions so that you're able to do potentially 2 sessions on each of the muscle groups per week or per 10-day training cycle or however you do it makes a lot of sense. And so that's why they do it. So even though some of the legs exercises involve pushing or the curls are a little bit a sense of a pull, they do the legs separately. So the push workout is an upper body push. The pull workout is an upper body pulling exercises. So what that means is take the push day, for example. A lot of the exercises that you do for chest are compound exercises. A compound exercise means one where it uses more than just one muscle group together in the exercise. It uses 2 muscle groups or more together and perhaps 2 or more joints moving. So you take something like a press. That involves the pectorals, which cause adduction of the arm around the shoulder joint at the same time as extension at the elbow. So that's using the chest and the triceps together. So what they're saying in a push day is you'd be working muscle groups like chest and then triceps, but also in pushing at different angles, you're using part of the shoulder as well, so the deltoids. So they would say like shoulder workouts. So a push day typically means that you're exercising your chest, your shoulders, particularly the front and middle of your shoulders, and your triceps. So what that can mean in terms of exercises is that you'd be doing some bench pressing, some flat pressing, on either on a bench or machine of a certain type, something on an incline, focusing on chest and the front of the shoulders of some type, and some kind of overhead pressing involving the deltoids, and then you'd move on from looking primarily at the chest and the shoulders to looking at the triceps. And it's the rationale of, well, the triceps and the deltoids are going to be warmed up anyway when training chest, or they would have been warmed up anyway if you'd started on shoulders. So when you apply this, you're always going to tailor it to your own needs. So probably if your shoulders were weaker than your chest, say, you do the shoulder exercises earlier on in the workout as priority. You get them when you're fresher. and then you do chest, and then really you do probably the triceps last in any setup of this. Now the pull workout. So I'll give us some example exercises because you've actually asked here for which exercise goes best with them. Now there's not a one size fits all, but I could give some examples of pressing with the chest. Could mean a machine where you're sat in the position that I'm in at the moment and you're pressing away from you like this, like some of the plate loaded machines or machines on a pin stack, or it could mean lying flat on your back on a barbell press, or it could mean dumbbell presses, lying flat on your back. Then the upper portion of the chest would be on a 45-degree bench, roughly speaking, could be more or less degrees depending on what works best for you. And that could either be a machine that's at that angle, or it could be dumbbell or barbell pressing at that angle. Then your overhead pressing, it could be something like a dumbbell press overhead, or it could be the military press sat down with the barbell, or it could be push presses, which is where you stand up with a barbell and use a bit of jerk in your legs to push up on each rep. Or it could be one of many machines that involve an overhead pressing movement focused on the shoulders. And then tricep exercises, for example, could include like a close grip press, or tricep push downs, or tricep extensions overhead with a cable on the pulley, or certain machines that are at that angle. And it could involve skull crushers where you're lying flat on your back with a barbell. If you are familiar with all these exercises, sorry to labour the point, perhaps you want to skip ahead. If you're more beginner and a lot of those exercises you don't know, just stick with the channel because I'll demonstrate them in a push-pull leg setup in the weeks to come. So I've got all of that. Then you've got the pull workout is basically muscles like the ones in your back, perhaps the trapezius part of your shoulders, and then the biceps, because they'd be working in conjunction anyway. So you do any rowing movement, it's involving the muscles in your back, but also flexion at the elbow, which would be the biceps roll, or part of the biceps roll, as well as supinating the hand. So you'd have exercises perhaps like pull-ups, lat pull-downs, barbell rows, cable rows, any machine rows where you're in a machine sat down and pulling at the handles to pull a weight stack. And then it could involve exercises like even deadlifts or rack pulls. And then bicep exercises are going to be various kinds of curls like barbell curl, preacher curl, dumbbell curls. And all of these, I've given examples of loads of these in my muscle group based workouts. So if you look at what could be in a pull day, if you look at my back days, if you look at my arm days and the bicep section of the arm days, a lot of those exercises would be like in a pull workout in this setup. But as I say, the rationale with the pull workout, or push-pull legs in general, is that these muscles are working together anyway in the compound exercises that feature in the part of the workout for the bigger muscle group, and therefore you can work them in that same workout where they've had a little go by adding on biceps, and then all of those muscles get a complete rest until they come round the next time. Yeah, hope that makes sense. And then just to be complete, legs is going to involve movements that are pushing and pulling. So you'd have very typically things that are like pushing of various kinds of squats and focus on the quadriceps. So you've got hack squats, barbell squats, front squats, leg presses, and then more emphasis on the hamstrings. You've got straight leg deadlifts, seated curls, lying leg curls. You've got leg extensions that isolate the quadriceps. You'd be doing calves at the end of that workout most typically as well. So that would involve things like seated calf raises, standing calf raises. Some of the more unusual ones like donkey calf raises and horizontal leg press calf raises that are in my calves workout videos. So if you wanted to look at my existing videos of what would feature in a leg day workout, you can look at my leg day workouts, my calves workouts videos, and also my ones that are just on quads and hamstrings. And those would be all the variety of exercises that would feature in a legs day in a push-pull legs kind of system. And then the way that people are doing it now is they have two versions of each workout. So there'll be like push 1 and push 2. and they alternate. Same for the pull workouts, same for the legs workouts, and each of those workouts has more or less emphasis on one of the muscle groups that falls into that scheme. So it can be a setup where you're doing them all twice a week, say, but the first push workout would be more focused on chest and shoulders and arms, shoulders and triceps, and then perhaps the second push workout that you do that week would be more focused on the shoulders first and then the chest afterwards. And then the same for the back one is perhaps the first pull workout, we're calling it, would be more focused on the lats and would involve more pull-ups and more high rows and that kind of thing. And then the second pull workout might be focused a little bit more on like the trapezius and the rhomboids and the teres, and might involve more like T-bar rows and other kinds of rows before any pull downs, if any at all. Or variously jigging it around. So you know, probably you're going to like it better if it's a bit more individualized. Probably if one muscle group is much obviously weaker than another, then it would always be priority on the weaker one in both of the workouts if you're splitting it up like that. And then the same with the legs. There might be the first leg workout is more focused on the quads, the second is more focused on the hamstrings. But, you know, if individually your quads were particularly weak, you might have both of them have a significant amount, if not the majority of it, on quads. So I hope that makes sense. It will make more sense in the coming weeks. I promise you, because I'm going to adopt a push-pull legs system for a week or two to demonstrate this, because it'll be good content, because it's a very popular split, because it makes sense for these reasons of full work on muscles that work together and then full rest in between, and get more and more accumulated volume that way. Where it falls down is basically if you have weak arms. So like Kuba says, he's a good example actually. Kuba says basically that he had particularly good arms at an early age and they weren't a weak point for him. So it was a great system for him. But, you know, if you had weaker arms, it can be a disadvantage because they're never getting done full force, because it never really makes sense for them to go first in these push and pull workouts, because they'll weaken your compound lifts for the bigger muscle groups, and so they always get done last. So it's very difficult to focus on arms like in a push-pull legs setup. So if your arms are coming along nicely anyway, or were a genetic strong point, the push-pull legs can be ideal. If your arms weren't so great, you maybe want a body part split where arms gets its own day, or you could do push-pull legs arms as a split where the push and pull days have less arms exercises because they're given their own separate day, or even none at all because you're going to give it its own separate day. So you could do a split where it's push, pull, legs, arms, push, pull, legs, arms. So there are no like rules in all of this. It's all got to be adapted to what's working best for you, which is why I'm so focused on tracking results and doing measurements weekly and adjusting against that. So that's how that all sits, and I hope that makes sense for you there. Now, next question is the juicier one, of course. Ice Cub asks, would you recommend any SARMs or steroids for a beginner hobbyist that just wants to put on some size and strength quicker? Well, like, what a question. Firstly, I want to say that when it comes to PEDs, what you're looking at on my channel is just for like academic curiosity. It's not to be construed as advice, and you're never going to have me recommend doing certain practices when it comes to that side of things. I think that should be common sense, because obviously these things are subject to legal restrictions that differ all over the world, and it's very complicated for YouTube to deal with that. So they have their policies about these such things, that you're not meant to be endorsing them, and that makes perfect sense because it's a complicated like legal picture across the world, and it's all subject to the medical system, which again differs across the world. And I'm not a doctor, so nothing to do with PEDs is ever advice, and it's a bit of a social taboo as well. So, you know, where I could say I'll do this kind of exercise, the kind of view out there in the world in general is that if you take some information about an exercise and you injure yourself, most people are going to take the view that it's your fault, basically. Whereas when it comes to PEDs and such like, if I say, oh, this would be a good idea, and then someone takes some kind of action based on that, there will be a greater proportion of people out there, because of the kind of, zeitgeist or view in society and the taboo around it. There'll be a greater proportion of people that will think that it's somehow my responsibility. Well, I don't take any responsibility for any of that. It's information only, it's for your entertainment, and it's for me to analyse bodybuilding as a physique philosopher. Philosophy literally means love of wisdom, so this is of academic interest only, armchair stuff. So when I talk about PEDs, I'm just reporting to you how bodybuilding works, how the pros do it, because you might just want to know that out of interest, in the same way that you might want to learn like how a stuntman does what he does in the movies, but you're never going to go and do that, of course. So me not being a doctor and me not giving advice, I would say, do I recommend any SARMs or steroids for a beginner hobbyist? No, I don't. I don't touch them. Speak to your doctor, do that. But I'll give you what a bodybuilder, for your interest, what a bodybuilder might say about this situation. And because you've mentioned beginner hobbyist, the answer, like from a bodybuilder in a conversation in a gym that you got friendly with without a camera on, would actually be pretty similar to my first answer, the real answer, and that would be kind of no. Not for a beginner. It's the kind of thing where, as mean as it sounds to say it like this, if you have to ask, like, would something like that be a good idea, then that means the answer is no, because if you were more informed, you would know without having to ask a question like that. And I'm not saying that to be mean, I'm sort of saying that to start explaining the landscape of PEDs to you in a very real way. I try to be as helpful as I possibly can be on this channel. I try to talk as frankly as I possibly can about all of these issues. So if that's important to you, then make sure you subscribe, because I'm really trying my best to help here. But when it comes to a question like that, because you've mentioned beginner hobbyist, it's kind of like you would need to not be a beginner to make the best of the assistants, you see, because most of these things within the realm of PEDs are not healthy. Most bodybuilders and most serious people will take the view that there's going to be a limited amount of years that you can do enhancement at a truly enhancing level, and get away with it, so to speak. So strategically, those limited number of years that you're going to do that are going to be best deployed over the years of your lifting career, where you're best placed to make best use of them, which is when your training is already pretty hard, and strength gains are plateaued, and your diet has already been followed meticulously, monitored, tracked, adjusted for, and then you've plateaued for 6 to 12 months after that, that you're going to make the most out of the growth potential that would be added with all of the PEDs and such like. So for a beginner hobbyist, I'd say no, I wouldn't recommend anything like that, because you won't make best use of it, because you're using up your limited amount of years that you could get away with all of that most easily, on the years where they'd be wasted because you haven't plateaued everything else out in the system. So in one of my previous videos I said that really the 4 parts of bodybuilding, being training, nutrition, PEDs, and lifestyle recovery and everything like that, you should try and max out the other 3 before you introduce the PEDs, and then you'll get the best result from the PEDs, and you'll be using up the best years on them to do that. So it's kind of not really for beginners. I think the only exception that a bodybuilding coach out in the real world might make for that is if they really had an eye for that and said, you have such genetic potential that you'd be wasting that to not get in the fast lane quite quickly. Someone might say that. But if you're asking me this question, then I'm sorry to say that's probably not you, because if that was you, you would have kind of been discovered, so to speak, like before this, a bit like, talent scouting in any other sport. So you take these guys that are in their early 20s, and they're far more advanced than me. So I don't want to name names because I don't want to get gossipy and be a channel like that. But there are certain like IFBB pros that are like really young, and it's kind of obvious to anyone that knows what they're looking at that they would have had to have been in the fast lane, so to speak, from their late teens. Now, I think a bodybuilding coach would only say that that could be a good idea if they've really got that much genetic potential, which has nothing to do with like the methods being used. You either got it or you haven't. So it's to do with like your bone structure and your muscle insertions, that body is going to look tremendous and world beating if like absolutely maxed out, and any delay on that is a delay to the potentially amazing career ahead. And if you're that sort of person, you probably look a bit enhanced before you actually are enhanced, or you'd look exceptionally muscular before your training was that good, and someone would sort of like take you under their wing and sort of say, man, you've got real potential here. And I think it's not mean for me to say that, because that's not me. Like I'm not as good as these kind of guys that I'm talking about. I feel like, with my height of 6'3" and one or two crappy like muscle insertions that are a bit short and stuff like that, I'm not one of these ones that's like amazingly put together to be like a superstar. For me, it's more about breaking down topics and being relatable and discussing issues and making content. And I can get big, I can get shredded, but I don't look as good as like these guys for these genetic reasons partly. And so, that's most of us. So, like, for most of us, it's really not worth doing that kind of thing as a beginner. And if it were, probably you'd already know and not have to ask the questions. So I really can't recommend that. And, we all want to put size and strength on quicker. I can totally relate to that. So, don't feel bad about asking or anything like that. You can ask me anything, but what I will say about size and strength quicker is that it's always limited by the weakest link in the chain. So while it will be a quick jump forward, like the first time you expose, the first 2 or 3 times you expose yourself to like PEDs, or when you take another part of the PED toolbox and put it in for the first time, it'll be a bit of a jump forwards. But even with those exceptions, still the rest of it is still quite slow going and limited by how quickly and effectively you can do everything else, like actually get all the food down, and you still have to take breaks. I mean, like, the food has been the biggest challenge of my whole getting to 300 pounds thing. So size and strength coming quicker, it isn't something that someone in the PED approach to things experiences most of the time even. So you still have to manage your expectations there. But I think what I would say for a beginner is that there's no time that's too soon to at least learn about these things. So while I would always say, or any experienced person would say, this is not for you to be doing just now, we would all say you can learn about it as much as you want just now, so that then you're better informed about these matters just for your own personal interest or your considerations around how bodybuilding works later down the road. So there's no time that's too soon for that, and I tried to help with that basically with this channel. So if you look at my interview with Dave Crossland that I did at the Arnold Expo, that was video number 2 from my Arnold ones. I asked him what he would recommend as good resource to learn about these things if you didn't know about them, and he suggested William Llewellyn's Anabolics book. I've actually done a book review of that book, so you might want to look at the Crossland interview I did. You might want to look at my book review of that, and most of all, you might want to get hold of that book and just be reading away there. Another resource that I mentioned for learning was the New England Journal of Medicine study on testosterone doses. So I can tell you that most cycles, or most people that start on that kind of route do look at testosterone first, because most of the things that are used cause a lot of suppression of natural testosterone, which makes you feel not quite right, just to put it basically. And so you want at least replacement of that. That's the thinking that most people have. So most people, when they start down that road, kind of start with testosterone. So if you wanted to be learning about that, you've got the New England Journal of Medicine study into testosterone and doses and effects that were noted and side effects that were noted. I did another video on the power of the mind and suggestion and the placebo effect around these things in one of my early videos that looked at a study on Dianabol and the placebo effect. You might want to consider watching that. Other than Llewellyn's Anabolics, I've got another book that I can recommend here. It would be who's it by? It's in my desk here. You've got Anthony Roberts and Brian Clapp, the Anabolic Steroids Ultimate Reference Guide. That would be another one that I'd recommend reading to cover for your own knowledge. It'll be one that I'll do a book review on soon. So if you have a look at those videos, consider those books, consider looking at those studies. That would be like a good starting point of your own theoretical knowledge on such topics. So I hope that's helpful. That's helpful for you there. As for the SARMs, I think if you watched all of my video on SARMs all the way through, you should understand like my perspective on that, and the reasons why generally most experienced bodybuilders would not be recommending anything like that at all, actually, if you just take care to watch all of that video there. So hope all of that makes sense. Hope that wasn't too much of a disappointing answer, but that's the answer. Next question is a little bit more family friendly. It's just about how to use the machine. So this one's from Chelsea O'Leary 2240. Thanks for your question, Chelsea. This is about wanting to use a particular machine that's similar to Skull Crushers. So I did an arm workout, but it's a good question because it applies to machines in general and was something that I touched upon in my interview in the third Arnold video where I got to speak to Josh Maley. And we were talking about your kind of height and build and how that affects your exercise choices and whether you'd use machines. And I made the remark that very generally speaking, the more outside of the average you lie in terms of relative limb lengths and height and your build, the more you're going to lean towards free weights for effective exercises than machines. Because machines are kind of like, they're like an item of clothing that says one size fits all, which means that it's kind of like this baseball hat, it'd be like one size fits all, but then it has the different poppers to like put for different head circumferences. And I've got one or two. I've got a really big head. Otherwise my body would look even bigger. So I'm actually even bigger than I look, but I have a big head packed with knowledge that makes my body look not as good as it really is. So I have like a hat, well, several hats that I have on the loosest one, and they still don't fit too good. So it's a bit like that with the machines, in that it's like one size fits all, but then you have like these seat adjustments and other pad adjustments that can work more or less effectively. And you said that the seat is all the way up on the arm extension exercise, and that's still not good enough, and you maybe putting a plate to boost you up. I would say that may work. Like in some gyms, you've got like these pads that are for that purpose. So you put them behind your back to take your shoulders out of pressing and fly exercises and work more on the chest by putting it behind your back in the seat. But you can also use those kind of pads if they're about to put under yourself to boost your height up for other machines. But with certain machines, other parts of it won't be adjustable, so that might put you higher up and your upper arm fit in it better, but then the length of your forearm might not be ideal for where the actual handle and mechanism is. So I find this with the Hammer Strength MTS curl, where the arms go up on the pad here and you curl here. I find that my forearm comes into it, or I slip, unless I just put the handle on the bottom of my hand instead of gripping it fully. And that's because I'm very like long, have this kind of like long wingspan going on with my height that I don't fit too good in exercises for that reason. So you can try it with a pad if there's one about, rather than a plate. A plate might be a bit cold, and if you don't have that, then maybe you can buy your own and take it to the gym, or have a stack of clothes, a couple of hoodies to sit on and try that. But really, that doesn't mean it's going to work, because it's not all about the height. It'll be about the relative bone lengths in your limbs as well for certain machines, especially these arm ones. So I'd say try it, but it doesn't mean that it's going to work. If you're looking for alternatives for that particular exercise, I would just say the skull crushers with a barbell or dumbbells. And if you don't like the angle on it, you could always put the bench on a slight incline of like 20 degrees and try again, like I sometimes do for my dumbbell skull crushers. You can even do an exercise with cable that's at that sort of angle. So you've got to find workarounds. So sometimes this means that you're inventing your own variations on exercises, which can be quite fun. It's always fun to find new ways of training, if only to keep things fresh. So I would say you can try that booster. You can try sitting in it differently, gripping things differently. If not, you got alternatives with a dual adjustable pulley on the cable, and how you stand or lie on a bench in relation to that, or just default to free weights in a lot of these cases. And I think free weights will work for everyone for pretty much all the upper body stuff. It's really the machines that I rely on more for the work on the legs and isolating things like hamstrings and calves, where I wouldn't want to do without machines. But I'm actually happy with free weights for everything upper body. So I hope some of those remarks are helpful to some of you, whether it's the skull crushers arm extension exercise or a different one that you've been wondering about. This is some of the experiments that you could do to get better use out of that exercise. So I hope that helps. And last question for today is more the competing side. I was asked today about when you know if you're big enough to compete, and it all depends on the expectations of the category, federation, and type of competition that you're entering. So I would say that the most objective way of knowing is if it's something that has weight limits that are scaled to height, or different weight categories, and you can compare yourself objectively to athletes that have competed and done well the previous year, or within the same category of the same kind of show within that federation. So if you can find someone that's about your height and go through their Instagram until the post where they've kind of revealed their off-season weight and their contest weight, and you can make some kind of objective comparison to that yourself, of when you were in best shape, very close to contest ready, and what you weighed at that point, and then your peak off-season weight, and how that compares to people that are succeeding in what you're looking at. That's a really good way of doing it. Otherwise, you'd be looking at someone who has an expertise for this and can judge it with their eye. But I think it's easiest once you've competed, like for one season before, and you've seen where you stand for the type of bodybuilding category and contests that you're entering, and where you were placed, and how much you could add to that within a certain time frame based on what you did before, leading up to the contests that you did. So there's no answer that I can give you in like kilograms and stuff like that. But if you wanted to get a flavour for it without looking at individuals that were your same height, you could look at the kind of weight categories that they have in NPC for bodybuilding, the amateur NPC stuff, or you could look at the NPC rules for classic physique, and what the weight restriction is for each inch of height, and that's all published on the NPC website. So if you just Google like NPC classic physique, like height rules, it's in the rules, height and weight rules. It's in the rules for classic physique, the weight restrictions, and you can compare to, you can look at your height on that list and compare to that, and that would be classic bodybuilding. And if you feel like the last time you were really, really properly ripped, you weighed more than what the height restriction is for that, then you'd be looking more at open bodybuilding, and then you could look at which weight category you'd fall into for that, and look at, what that looks like by looking at a contest on YouTube and footage and seeing how your contest pictures or pictures when you're in shape compare to what you see on stage in that weight category if you exceeded the classic physique one, because more mass would be expected for open bodybuilding, generally speaking. So that would be a good way of doing it if you don't have someone to directly compare to at your height. So that's how you would know. But you wouldn't know how quickly you could progress to a certain point until you actually get into a program, like either monitoring it carefully yourself or working with someone. So that would give you an idea of the pace of change and where you could be in what time frame from there. So a little bit of a vague answer, but that would give you some signposts to working that out somewhat objectively, and I hope that helps. So that's all of the questions that I've got from you guys. I really appreciate the engagement always. So if you have any more questions about anything at all, you can put them in the comments of this video, or indeed any of my other videos. If you like the comprehensive coverage of all topics in bodybuilding, please consider subscribing. And we're very close to 1,000 subscribers now, so if you want to be able to be part of the cool crew that got in there when it was unknown and underground, you haven't got much time left, and I recommend you subscribe. So see you very soon. I'll be answering all questions in the comments if they're a quick one, or if they're going to be a nice longer discussion, I may add them to another video like this in the near future. Have a good weekend, guys, and I'll be back online tomorrow. Cheers.